Mark 7, beginning in verse 1. Then came together unto him, unto Christ, the Pharisees and certain of the scribes, which came from Jerusalem. And when they saw some of his disciples eat bread with defiled, that is to say, with unwashen hands, they found fault. For the Pharisees and all the Jews, except they wash their hands often, eat not, holding the tradition of the elders. It wasn't a commandment of God that you had to wash your hands ritually in a certain way before eating. Now, the NIV Study Bible note on the tradition of the elders, their note is from Matthew 15, verse 2, where it's also mentioning the tradition of the elders, but it appears to be the same story. But this is the NIV Study Bible note on the tradition of the elders. Quote, after the Babylonian captivity, the Jewish rabbis began to make meticulous rules and regulations governing the daily life of the people. These were interpretations and applications of the law of Moses, handed down from generation to generation. In Jesus' day, this tradition of the elders was in oral form. It was not until circa AD 200 that it was put into writing in the Mishnah. So the motivation was they knew that their breaking God's law is what caused the Babylonian captivity. So they added these meticulous rules and regulations to try to make sure it didn't happen again. It wasn't a bad motivation. That was the motivation. But they weren't commandments of God. Let's get back to Mark 7. Let's go to verse 3. For the Pharisees and all the Jews, unless they wash their hands often, eat not, holding the tradition of the elders. And when they come from the market, except they wash, they eat not. And many other things there be which they have received to hold, such as the washing of cups and pots, brazen vessels, and of tables. Then the Pharisees and scribes asked him, why walk not thy disciples according to the tradition of the elders, but eat bread with unwashen hands? Once again, they weren't eating with filthy hands. They hadn't followed the ritual washings prescribed by the tradition of the elders. Verse 6, Christ answered and said unto them, well has Isaiah prophesied of you hypocrites, as it is written, this people honors me with their lips, but their heart is far from me. Howbeit in vain do they worship me, teaching for doctrines the commandments of men. For laying aside the commandment of God, you hold the tradition of men, as the washing of pots and cups, and many other such like things you do. Here's verse 9 of Mark 7. And he said unto them, full well you reject the commandment of God, that you may keep your own tradition, the tradition of the elders, church traditions. You don't take the tradition of the elders and put it above the commandments of God. And obviously you shouldn't take church traditions and put it ahead of the commandments of God. It's interesting. God commands a day of worship and 7 holy days. He commands. And yet the majority of people professing to be Christian don't keep the weekly day of worship he commands. And out of those 7 holy days, they don't intentionally keep any one of them. Now, some keep one of them, Pentecost, just because their church happens to have service that day. But for the most part, the feasts of the Lord and the Sabbath of the Lord are rejected in favor of the traditions of the church, the traditions of men. What we should all do is read this book for ourselves, and don't care what thy pastor saith, no matter how nice he looketh and speaketh and is dressed. We don't want Christ telling us this. Full well you reject the commandment of God that you may keep your own tradition. And you also don't want Christ telling you this. This is Matthew, I will close with this. This is Matthew 7, verses 21 through 23, New Living Translation. Not everyone who calls out to me, Lord, Lord, will enter the kingdom of heaven. Only those who actually do the will of my Father in heaven will enter. On judgment day, many will say to me, Lord, Lord, we prophesied in your name and cast out demons in your name and performed many miracles in your name. But I will reply, I never knew you. Get away from me, you who obey God's commandments. No, it doesn't say that. This is what it says. But I, Christ, will reply, I never knew you. Get away from me, you who break God's laws. Get away from me, you who break God's laws. Do you want to hear that? I certainly don't want to hear that. Peace.